made them. You did?
Bonnie made them, Bonnie.
If Bonnie made them, I'll take them. Thank you.
We're going to call the meeting to order. It's the March 8th edition of our meeting, and the reason it's called that is today's March 8th, as opposed to 4 days ago when the date was the only date of the year that's a command, March 4th. And we've done a couple of things between the last meeting and this meeting. One is the board met an executive session on February 13th, the 15th, 27th, and again on March 3rd. You might say, why did they have to meet 4 times in that period? And that's because we were considering people to take over the job, the esteemed job of manager once our esteemed existing manager retires in May. And we'll have an announcement about that shortly. And if you're able, please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Are there any additions suggested to the posted agenda? They can be considered now, but you have to ask to have them added at this point. Is anyone?
Just have an announcement coming
Sure.
up, all right? The proclamations for the Women's History Month for 2023 will be on the March 22 agenda. We recognize and will celebrate Women's History Month through March, but it will be on the next agenda. Thank you.
And of course, the whole month is Women's History Month. And continuing on, we have an announcement of the next township manager. And it says here, and I agree with this completely, the Board of Supervisors takes great pleasure in announcing the selection of Ms. Amy Farkas as the next Patton Township manager, succeeding Mr. Doug Erickson's retirement in mid-May of this year. Ms. Farkas has been employed as manager in Harris Township, Center County, since 2005, and that's, I know, before people who are less than about 15 years old weren't even born then. But there were things happening even back then, and Amy was one of the welcome to Patton Township. Well, you've been in Patton Township before, but there's Amy there if you'd like to stand up. And now the board we're going to consider the following action. The board agrees to hire and appoint Mrs. Farkas as the township manager to start on or around May 8th, 2023, this year, with the said appointment conditioned upon the execution of an employment agreement, which is nearly completed. And it'll be, the review will be finished by the township solicitor and board chair. And
So moved.
it's been moved.
Second.
It's been seconded. Are there any comments or suggestions, fears or consternation, worries, or other things? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously.
Yeah. Have her have a
Now,
comment.
that's an excellent idea, although we didn't add it to the agenda. But Amy, perhaps
Amy,
you'd
would
like
you
to?
Thank you.
Sure.
I would just like to thank you so much for appointing me as your next township manager. I knew when I walked into the first interview with the board that this was the place where I wanted to be. I have a tremendous amount of respect for the manager that preceded me, Doug Erickson, and the manager that preceded him, Tom Kurtz. And I reached out to Tom Kurtz and told him the good news, and he is ecstatic. So I am very excited to join your municipality, join your team. You have such a wonderful staff, and I'm very much looking forward to coming over here and working for you. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again. And we'll move right now to presentations and public hearings. And
Well, public comments first.
public comments first, because that comes before this. Does anyone have any comments? If you're on Zoom and you have a comment, raise your hand there and we'll call on you.
Mr. Brett Green has his hand up.
Brett.
Okay?
Go ahead, Mr. Green.
Hi, would this be a good time to propose an addition to the township code?
This is open public comment,
You
so.
can make any comment you'd like.
Okay, just wanted to be sure. Yep, so I've lived in Patton Township, just off Oakwood Avenue for about 7 years. And smoking is a personal right, but only to the point that it doesn't unavoidably harm others. You can compare this to the Clean Indoor Air Act, which prohibits smoking in most public businesses, and the Young Lungs That Play program, which bans smoking in public parks. I live in a townhouse, and periodically my next door neighbor smokes so heavily that his secondhand smoke permeates my home. I've taken reasonable steps to prevent this, such as keeping all my windows closed, and my neighbor has refused to consider any sort of accommodations. I'd like to ask the township to consider adding to the code a provision that would allow my housemates and I to breathe clean air in my own house. Such provisions already exist in other settings. For example, Section 51-8 of the code prohibits excessive vegetation that, I quote, throws off any unpleasant or obnoxious odor. Yes, and so while residents of Patton Township do have a right to smoke, and even outdoors where that smoke may blow across property lines, I think that this right should not be to the unavoidable detriment of residents trying to live peacefully in their own homes. Thanks for listening.
Okay. Let's put this on to consider. My first thought on this is that the owner of the property, if you're renting, should probably provide enough ventilation measures that doesn't happen. But that's just my opinion, but we can consider it.
We are both homeowners. I am the homeowner of this unit, and the next unit over is the owner of that unit.
Sutan?
Thanks, Brett, for your comments, and I guess I'm just curious, can you reiterate that code that you had cited?
Yes, are you talking about the one that was about
The
the one
noxious odors?
about vegetation throwing off the odors?
Yep.
Yeah, that one was 58-1.
So vegetation is permitted to do this, but your neighbor is not.
Yes, exactly. And vegetation is even prohibited from doing it outside. I can understand, like I have another neighbor who smokes outside, and I understand that you can't control where the air flows. So I'm perfectly understanding of that. But when it's unavoidable, I open the window, I smell smoke outside. I go back into my house, I smell the smoke inside. And the only way I can stop smelling it is if I put a gas mask on, which unfortunately I've had to do several times just to breathe clean air. And that's why I'm trying to find a solution that would make it so that I can just breathe clean air in my house without having to take any sort of drastic measures.
Well, as with any request, we'll discuss it and see if it should be referred to one of our committees for further evaluation of it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hope we can find a good solution that works for everyone. That is neither too restrictive of, my neighbor's rights without also putting my housemates and I under this condition.
No, it has to be annoying for you if you really notice it in your house.
Yeah.
Anyone else with a comment? Anyone else thinking of making a comment but might be intimidated by themselves or others into not making a comment? Okay, then we'll move along. And the next thing is our recognition of our excellent police officer. And I'll have Tyler Jolly, our chief, lead this presentation. This is a special thing, right?
This is a special thing. Yes, sir. Right here. All right. So I always appreciate the opportunity to come before the board and before our community to talk about our police department. I'm always very proud of our police department, very proud of the men and women who serve, our police officers. And they do work very hard every day. They make our community a better place and a safer place. But I really, really enjoy the opportunity once a year to come before the board and recognize an officer or officers who have gone above and beyond that call of duty. And before us tonight, we have Officer Sanchal Suhu, who is an 18-year veteran of the Patton Township Police Department. So I think that might even be longer than Amy's been at Harris. But we're here tonight to recognize his service and his actions on May 11th of 2022. On that day, Officer Suhu was on duty, was working uniform patrol, and he was dispatched to a restaurant in Patton Township, and the call was a report of a female who was choking on food. It was reported that the patient could not speak, she could not breathe, and her lips were beginning to turn blue because of the lack of oxygen. When Officer Suhu arrived, he found the patient was still choking. He immediately began first aid and administered a series of back blows and abdominal thrusts, obviously also known as the Heimlich maneuver, right? This helped to partially dislodge the obstruction, and the patient finally was able to exchange some air. EMS arrived on scene and was able to take over care of the patient and transport her to Mount Nittany Medical Center for more advanced care. But it was due to the quick actions of Officer Suhu that a life-threatening choking incident was stopped, the patient was saved, and the patient was able to be transported for more advanced medical care. His actions reflect the highest credit on himself and on the Patton Township Police Department. Now, we couldn't have scripted this any better, and it should be noted that Officer Suhu was the perfect person to have at the scene that day, as he serves as one of our department's instructors for CPR and first aid. But I know, because of how he's trained our other officers, that the other officers would have performed exactly like he did, and as he's trained us to do. But we need to recognize that he did a fantastic job that day. So it is my honor to present Officer Sanchal Suhu with the Patton Township Police Department Life-Saving Award for rendering life-saving first aid to a choking victim on May 11th of 2022.
I've seen the results of your training elsewhere. A friend of mine was visiting town a few years ago and had an episode in a restaurant, and Patton Township Police came and rescued him from his crisis. And this is the kind of thing the police are ready to do every day. So it's always good to have a recognition of this. Now, the next item is the Anti-Discrimination Regulations and Regional Human Relations Commission. And this was first introduced to us a couple of years ago, and the board is now going to have the manager describe what we're going to talk about and have a public hearing.
Thank you, Elliot. We went over the regulations at the last February 8th meeting with the board, detailed, what items are covered. We also reviewed the regulations to create a regional human relations commission for the municipalities that are participating. So far, that's Patton Township, Ferguson Township, and the Borough of State College. So we've advertised the regulations today. Both items, the anti-discrimination regulations and the steps to take to form the Human Relations Commission, are included in the one ordinance, 2023-627. It's been advertised as required by state law, and the chair should open the public hearing and take public comments.
The hearing is open now, and anyone who has a comment, let us know what it is. Don't all yell at once. Okay, well, in that case, we're ready to close the public hearing, right? And there's someone who want to move that?
So moved. Sorry.
Betsy moved, I'll second.
Okay. Any comments on the move to close the public hearing? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. And so now we're going to be joining Ferguson Township and also the borough in this.
You need
Need a
a
vote.
motion to adopt the ordinance.
But we also need a motion to adopt the ordinance, as the chair just completely forgot. And so is there a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved. Second. Second. Any comments? All in favor?
No.
I have one.
Comment over
I
here.
just,
Okay.
and I'm not certain to whom to address this. A little bit of confusion about the formation of the commission. It sounded like there's some wording, all appointments are made by the borough, but Patton may have one rep, Ferguson would have a rep. It wouldn't stop me from approving the resolution, but I just had a question about how that would work. Do you know any more, Doug?
To provide for administrative support and insurance coverage of the commission. It'll be a body of the State College Borough, and the council will make the appointments. Now, they'll be looking to Patton Township to make a nomination to...
From Patton.
From Patton
Gotcha.
to
Okay.
the Borough Council to nominate our representative.
Okay.
But,
Sort of like we get water from the Borough Water Authority, but we might also have a representative.
so this is different than an authority who has its own governance, and they would have their own insurance and their own administrative support. Again, to provide administrative support to the
Okay.
body, and probably more important, insurance coverage, liability insurance, and errors and omissions and things like that. It will be function of it'll be a state college,
A state college.
technically be, but it technically be one of the ABCs, the authorities, boards, and commissions of the State College Borough,
Okay.
but they will operate separately from the council, independent.
That makes perfect
Borough
sense. Thank you.
Council, so.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Okay, we've done that.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it passes unanimously. It's about time. It's a shame we have to have one, but, next item is the master plan amendment for the Geisinger Clinic 2023, and our fine planner is going to talk about that. This issue is much more important than the story of the woman who had headaches. She went to the doctor gave her these pills to take each night, and on the fourth night, she's looking in the mirror, she thinks something's wrong, but how can it be these pills? Fifth night, she's pretty sure, she starts measuring her height, and every night taking these pills, she's getting a 1/4 inch shorter. So she goes to her doctor and says to her, "Doctor, these pills are great for my headaches, but they're making me shrink." And the doctor looks at her and says, "Don't worry about it. You just have to be a little patient." Go ahead.
It's really hard to follow all of your facts. Okay, so Geisinger has submitted a master plan amendment for their facility located at 132 Abigail Lane in Port Matilda. It's a 52-acre tract located in the Office Buffer 2 and the I-99 overlay zoning districts. The previous 2005 master plan is being amended with 4 additional phases. Phase 3 is proposed in 2023, this year. It's a 2-story, 21,500 square foot addition with parking and other site improvements. Phase 4 includes a 3-story addition to the clinic for an additional 70,600 square feet of medical office space. And phases 5 and 6 are proposed for 2037. They include 2 detached office buildings at the top of the site with other site improvements. The Planning Commission recommended conditional approval of the plan based on the completion of all outstanding plan review comments from staff and other agencies. Attached in your agenda packet is a location map and all of the comment letters from staff and all of the agencies. The addition of the Center County and the Center Regional Planning Commission comments, that is new since your last meeting. I would also like to point out that one of the outstanding comments that staff had was regarding the parking. Per the ordinance, the parking can only exceed 120% of what is required for the site. So Geisinger's engineering firm discussed with staff, and attached to your agenda packet is a letter stating that they're going to remove the Phase 4 525 parking space garage that was previously proposed, and that puts them in compliance with the ordinance.
Okay. Well, does anyone have any questions for the plan? We're supposed to have a public hearing about it because the Planning Commission recommended approval with pending the technical items being completed. And so let me start the public hearing. Does anyone like to talk about this particular proposal? Come on up.
How you doing? My name is Josh Garris. I live on Gaynor Road. I'm not against the Geisinger, whatever. I'm here for years. The residents of Gaynor Road have been trying to get the water line connected from Welty Lane to basically the child dentist. The water line does not connect. It was oversized for the Geisinger project. And when the Phase 3 came around, the water line was supposed to be or will be connected. So my issue here is we all want water. That's not the problem. Is that the size of the water line is a 12-inch main. The normal sized water line that would run in a normal neighborhood would be an 8-inch. It costs for the frontage for the price to run the water line, for Geisinger to run the water line, will be more than double the cost of the 8-inch main. So as residents, when we want to tap onto that, we will have to pay a frontage fee based on that cost. And they'll pass those savings right down to us. So it will cost us twice as much money or more, it's actually more than twice as much money to connect to that water line for reasons out of our control. They were spec'd out, in 2004 or whatever when this process started. And I spoke with the water company today, and he said that yes, it is noted that when Phase 3 and it meets the requirements, blah, 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 that will be connected on Geisinger's tally. So just for instance, not including any connection to any residence on the house, on the street, just the frontage fee per resident, on a 1 acre lot is the average lot there. So you're, like a 150-foot wide lot up to a 2 acre lot, which would be about 300 feet wide, is going to range anywhere from $9,000 to $12,000 just as an entrance fee. And then you have to pay the water company on top of that, but that's their own issue. So it works out to be about $40 per foot for the residents will have to absorb on the street because the water main was in place for Geisinger, not for the, in intention of, houses being hooked to it, even though all of, the houses on the street are hooked to it. The other issue that we've run into, just to show the size of the main, they won't even the water company currently won't even let us pay for our own main and extend it because the pipe is so big that the water will go stagnant in the pipe, that a single family won't be able to use that much water out of it. So either they require us to connect the line, so everybody on the street has been waiting years for water to come. They're either on old wells in sandy soil, so the well pumps eat up and stuff, or on cisterns that collect rainwater and supply the house that way. There is a fill up over here at the Clearwater for the people that are on cisterns, but it's not convenient to haul 500 gallons of water at a time in a Subaru or something, so even with the water line now being run, we or some residents on the street are still unable to connect to it because the cost of that water line. So what I'm here for is to ask Geisinger to share the cost or, absorb the cost in their project. You're going to make less parking spaces, so you should have extra money in your budget. But, that cost should not trickle down to us. That is out of our control. And we've been waiting, for the water to show up. So, I'm not against the project in any way. I'm just here, so I think everybody should have the right to water. And, relying on rainwater is not, not the way anymore. So that's my comment on here, and I don't know if I'm at the right place to say that or not, or, I guess I am because it's the public hearing. And, I'm not here to hold up the plan. That's not what I want to do. But, we would like water. We would like to connect to it. And it's out of most people's budgets. It's out of our control. And so I don't know if the board can, ask Geisinger to work with the residents on the street. There's a couple that lives on the street that through COVID, they had to sell their house and actually move back in with their parents. And they're hopefully subdividing their parents' property on the street, and they want to build their own house. And that being said, they can't afford to hook the water, because of these inflated costs out of our control. So I don't know if the board can, require that, ask that, before moving forward, but I think it's, if we want to make jokes, should be a drop in the bucket compared to, the rest of the project, to, help us out on the street, if they're totally concerned about public health, then, yeah, that's what we asked. So.
Appreciate you bringing the issue to us, and we certainly need to at least discuss it and see what can be done. Doug, do you have any comments?
Well, the water main is owned by the State College Borough Water Authority, and they set all those charges and fees. So that discussion should be with the water authority. I'm pretty sure there's nothing in the municipality planning code that says you can require party A to provide resources to party B when it's really not connected to their development. If, you know, I couldn't tell you exactly what the water authority wants, but again, those are all they own the line. They're the ones who set the rates. So I think I would be very careful about promising anything at this point without legal review and to see what authority you may or may not have in this matter.
It seems like we should at least investigate that before going.
The rates are
Well,
set.
the township has no requirement. You may be surprised by this, but the township does not require that people have a well on their property or connect to public water.
Right.
So, that's always it's an option for people if you live outside the public water area. If you live within the public water area and you buy a new house, part of your cost to buy that house are the cost to extend the water main and do the tap and do all those things that the water authority requires. So like I said, I just, this is a issue that you should not rush to make an answer on. I don't know, again, that there's anything in the municipality's planning code that would say, Mr. Developer or Mr. Geisinger Clinic, you have to make certain payments to somebody who's off-site and, unrelated to the actual development. So best advice is to take it under consideration. We talk to the solicitor and get some more input on it.
Anyone else on the board have a comment on this?
Well, I just want to maybe paraphrase some of what Doug has said, and I think maybe what others on the board are feeling. There may not have to be a rush to come up with an answer, but I think there is a rush for us to find out more information. I suspected that it was perhaps not in our purview. But can we direct the solicitor to look into this, explore some options? Can we even make a statement that we think asking the water authority to explore other options? It just sounds like.
Well, again, if you want the water, asking them to explore an option for one person is the same as asking them to explore the option for everybody. Everybody who would end up in this circumstance from here on out, the water authority, you can't ask for one.
Well,
If we're going to treat
I would not
everybody
have to ask
equitably,
for
it's everybody from
everybody
here
again.
after.
Yeah, well,
So-
I think that's a good question to ask,
Pardon?
frankly.
It would be everyone on that street though, right?
Well, certainly.
Or in the next street that has the same set of circumstances too, which might be Scotia Road or something like that. So there's quite a few residents out in that area that aren't on public water. So
Well,
this could be, so
this
the
isn't
the cost is who pays to extend those mains
Right.
and who benefits from it. So,
This is the
So,
first-
so that's what the water company's saying, that this goes all the way back to 2004, when the initial plans were coming through, that when Phase 3 was met, that when Phase 3 came along, and I
I'm
talked
not
to.
arguing with what the water authority
Okay.
told you, I'm just
Give me
telling
my
you,
chance.
from Patton Township's point of view, your connection to the water authority, the Board of Supervisors of Patton Township has no authority over whether you can connect to the water authority's line or not.
Okay, that's not my,
And I don't believe that the Board of Supervisors has any authority to tell Geisinger that they have to somehow give you a benefit,
I don't,
based on the fact that they want to put a 20,000 square foot addition to their building.
well, from my understanding from the water authority, that they are going to make them connect the line. They're gonna make them make a loop. So we don't have another Georgetown.
That could be, but
That-
Geisinger's not charging you to make a connection to this.
The water company will charge me the frontage fee. The frontage fee will be given back to Geisinger because they paid for the line.
Because that's the water authority's policy.
Mr. Chair, can I,
Go ahead.
So,
can we just hold it for a minute? What our recommendation is we're gonna talk to our solicitor. From there, the board would sit down and discuss this as a whole. But we need to talk to our solicitor first. We thank you for bringing that to our attention. But allow us to at least review it and get answers from our solicitor before we can even say anything. But thank you for taking the time out and bringing it to this board. Because without you letting us know on this issue, we would not have known
Right.
what you were going through.
But this isn't the first time this has happened, and I'm not saying this on behalf of the board, I'm just here at this meeting. When the line was run down our street as part of the connection to the Ridgecrest project, we got letters saying that we could connect to the borough's water and pay a special rate if we agreed to it. And so we sent a letter in saying we agreed to it, and the next thing we found out, they weren't going to do it, because not enough people had signed up. And so to me, it was very deceptive. So I understand your concern, I'm sympathetic to it, but again, me being sympathetic or concerned about it has nothing to do at all with what we can or can't do, so we're going to talk to our solicitor.
Understandable? Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other
Doug,
comments?
is there a timeline on this that has to be?
Yeah, there is a timeline.
Okay, that's what I need to find.
We just asked for the extension, so.
I mean, if you want to extend it, we could ask the developer to provide us an extension.
Could they do that and give us just a moment, just give us time to talk?
If you're contemplating, I don't know if Betsy wants any input, but
Is she here?
I'm not sure that there's anything in the municipality's
hi.
planning code that says, you can have Geisinger somehow, that somehow will make Geisinger make these residents whole, or give these residents some sort of benefit, whether it's money or it's money they don't have to pay.
We don't know what the outcome is at this point.
I didn't know Betsy was online.
So
Hi,
I don't know if
Betsy.
she wants to opine on that today, but.
She's got her hand up. so let's
Yeah.
call her.
I'm here, and I think, you've got to parse the issues out here. Doug is absolutely correct. The Water Authority is a separate body, and in some municipalities, it's a private company, as many of you know. And so they have their own capacity or decision-making as to how they extend. And I am sure, because the Water Authority, much like the Sewer Authority, spends a lot of time looking at plans and advising as to how they might extend lines. And we've gone through this issue, everybody, with sewer service, right, for Grays Woods, right? You reach this point, we're going to add this, we're going to do that. Sewer, because of Act 537, sewer does come under your purview, and that's hence why we have a regional plan and we do certain things. Water is a very different animal. So you could not, and this is, Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, this is not even a conditional use scenario. Even in a conditional use scenario where you can oppose conditions, I don't even think you can tie that to the water situation and say, hey, you've got to do certain things. I think the appropriate step here is for the township, probably at the staff level, I hate to put that on you guys, to have a conversation with the Water Authority about this issue and how we might go down the road and deal with this issue. If your former supervisor, Bryce Boyer, were here, he would tell you exactly that, because that's how Ridgemont happened. Ridgemont didn't happen because the Water Authority just said, oh, let's help this I realize there are some precipitating circumstances there, but Bryce did an awful lot of legwork to get that done. And the Water Authority has to look not only at this issue, But remember, they've got in Ferguson, the Rock Springs water issue, they've got issues. I mean, I don't know if Ms. Farkas is still there, but maybe there's an issue in Harris Township. I mean, they've got a broad territory, so they have to plan accordingly. I suspect that it is correct that if they say to Geisinger, if you need this much water service, you will build this line. I had a client do that in Bellefonte at one point. And then there's a payback process for installation of that line as people are added into the line. That's what happened. And I don't know, Doug, if you've had any specific situations in Patton where that's happened, but I know there are other municipalities in the center region where a water line got extended and as lots along that line were developed, they then recontributed back to the water line that had been put in the street. But that's all a water authority function. That is not the township. That's not anything that you get involved with respect to land development.
Yeah, I think, Betsy, the question right now tonight, is there any way that the board has authority to tie this issue back into the master plan for Geisinger?
I think I would tread very carefully doing that because I don't think that's part of your prerogative.
Okay.
But, you know.
That's true, but when is our deadline for having to pass this, or it goes into effect automatically?
We've already extended it.
Alex, you want to go find out? We'll just,
Well, I know we requested a time extension
well, we'll
yesterday.
go find out the actual date that we have to take action by. So we know, I don't want to guess.
Okay. Thank you, Betsy.
So we can wait until we can move on and reconvene on this issue when Alex gets back.
Okay.
We can do that. So we'll go to,
Just,
go ahead.
yeah, just for clarity, so the residents will still have their existing way of getting water, even with this line being put in, correct?
You have to ask him.
Okay.
I assume he has water source today.
Yes, I mean, the people that are on cisterns are dependent on rainfall. So, you know, or like I said, coming up and getting water, or running a water hose from a neighbor that is connected on the ends of the streets to water. Again, some of the houses are on shared wells that have failed, or, you know, they're old, and who wouldn't want to hook to, you know, the water source. And it's, yeah, but, yes, so, yes, there is water, but, all of our cisterns have dried up or leaked, or, the residents on the property, on the street have filled their cisterns, had the fire company fill them out of a tanker truck and come and check the next day to realize that the cistern had a crack in it and there's only 1/3 of the water left. And to fix that, you have to drain the rest of it out to seal it. And so it's the way of life that it was. You know, at one point, houses didn't have power and people lived in them. And now houses all have power. So, you know, it's progress is, you know, so do people have water to flush their toilet? Yes, but you don't drink cistern water because it's a tank of water that's collected off of your roof. And so, yes, people do have water, but it's
so,
not great.
Yeah, and so what I'm hearing, again, there's a line being put in, it is larger in size, thus.
Then the normal line would be running through the development, yeah.
And so then that cost, given how extreme it is cost prohibitive for people being able to join.
To connect to the
connect
water,
with it.
yeah, so the line is, and actually, right now, the water company would not even allow anybody to extend the line without connecting the complete line. So any resident that wanted to extend the line now would have to run the entire line because the line size would make the water go bad in the line. So the water company in turn would be supplying us with, you know, bad water. because of the line size. We wouldn't be able to cycle enough through. Even in, even in neighborhoods where in Park Forest, every summer the water company comes through and flushes the hydrants. They do that to flush the lines out too. It gets sediment out of the lines and everything. So even high-use lines, they get sediment built up in it. So just amplify that by bigger lines and much less usage. So they won't even allow us to extend any line right now unless we were to connect it the whole way through. So that's the size of the line that I'm, getting at. That
For sure. And then the water authority, their remedy for residents was what, if anything, did they communicate?
tough luck.
Okay.
Pay the
Because
price.
I'm trying to understand, get back to, I'm hearing that there's not much we can do.
Yeah.
And you're here, and I appreciate you coming, and obviously we want to be responsive to that. We spend a lot of time talking about this, and so I just, in my mind, want to have an understanding of what's being asked
Yeah,
of
so
us.
what I'm asking is just to work with Geisinger on, speaking with the water company, it's noted from a long time back that when phase 3 happens, that they'll have to connect that water line. What I'm here for is because it is an undue hardship on us because of the size of the line that is there to even get the water.
Okay, but once again, we
So-
actually have no direct.
I only came up because he asked, so.
I know, I understand, and I'm glad you did. It's just that we don't have any direct power to do that, but we do have the power to ask to have a conversation
With the water
with the
company
water company and see what happens.
that's doing business in your neighborhood.
And
So,
what did we find out about the,
We're still checking.
oh, okay. The reason I asked about the date is that we can have time to have a discussion, like if the date is that we have to approve this by tomorrow or it goes into effect automatically, that's a big deal, but if we have a couple of weeks, it could be done at the next meeting after a discussion is had. Not that nobody's promised anything, that anything will happen with the discussion, because we can't do that.
the best I can ask for is that you'll look into it, and that's what you're telling me to do. The only reason I came back up is because he had more questions.
I appreciate you.
So, any other questions?
Thank you for your time, too. That's really an education.
Steve Bear, 112 Pinewood Place. I was just curious, I missed it. The 52, the addition of the 52 space parking lot, which side of the property is that? Where is that on the property?
For phase 3,
Yeah.
it's on the southeastern side of the property. So the land development plan is sitting on our desk right now, and due to the site constraints, they're requesting a waiver for phase 3. Just because of the volume of square footage that they're adding to the building. They're required to have, I think it's 118 spaces. Don't quote me on that, 100-some spaces, and they're requesting to put half of that. That's the 50-some acre, or 50-some spot parking space. And it's already a gravel pad. It looks like they have some maintenance vehicles that are parked there already.
Okay.
So if you go up Abigail Lane towards the top of the site, it's
It's on the right. Okay, thank you, thank you.
So we're being asked to accept fewer parking spaces than.
No, they had more, they had far more parking spaces than they
Allotted.
needed.
Okay.
And actually, in this zoning district, the office buffer district 2, there's actually a maximum, that number of parking spaces that they can have. So with the parking deck, they were actually over, and without the parking deck, they still have enough parking.
Great.
So we just wanted to make sure everybody understood that that parking deck was not part of the plan now, but they're still in compliance.
Did we find anything else about the date?
No, not until.
Well, because we'd be ready to, we have to vote, we should vote on it immediately if we have
We
it.
want to make sure we have the absolute right date for you.
Right, okay. We'll come back to this.
Are we,
I'm going to temporarily suspend the public hearing on this.
okay.
Did we find a date?
It's for both.
Okay, so we have 90 days from today to take action
Okay.
on the master plan.
I wouldn't want to take 90 days, but let's at least wait till the next meeting so we can get to see what happens in terms of the conversation. Is that okay?
Yeah, I'm okay waiting until the next meeting. Again, it's helpful to have as much information as we can, and whether or not we can do something, definitely want to hear our residents out. And it seems like, again, this is a larger concern for many residents that's going to continue to happen. And so, again, us just being able to have a better understanding moving forward so we can better communicate that, advocate that in whatever ways we can is helpful. So
Okay.
appreciate the extension.
I just want to clarify with the manager, when we just simply postpone, we don't have to re-advertise a public hearing.
No, we're making the announcement today that we're recessing this public hearing until March 22nd, and we will take it back up then, so.
Okay, so we're recessing the hearing until March 22nd. No promises have been made to anyone. We're simply going to see if we can have a conversation to find out more information. Which then brings us to,
I have a question about procedure. So since we're suspending the public hearing, does that mean we're not receiving any comments from the board on other aspects of the plan?
well, we can do that.
Should I just save those until later? I mean, I've got them right here, and Tony probably knows what I'm going to talk about.
Well, it's not Tony's plan,
Oh, I thought you were here for that. No, never mind, sorry about that.
so.
We may as well ask any
Native
questions.
plants.
Up to you. I would,
I'd like to make some comments about the landscaping
Sure.
and who's here to receive it. Oh, awesome, okay. Sorry about that. I assumed, I've talked to Tony about native plants before, so.
Yep.
I
My name
apologize.
is Nick Argot with Thornton Lawson Engineering. I represent Geisinger.
Perfect, okay. So I've just looked over the plants in the native, in the landscaping plan, and I wanted to just point out a couple of things. You've got green ash and white ash in there, and both of them are susceptible to the ash borer, so I personally recommend that you not use them. And then there are a couple of trees, the Serbian spruce and the Norway spruce.
what are you telling me?
Neither of them are native to this area, and the Norway spruce in particular renders habitat unpalatable to native species, to any shrubs that you'd have in there. So I'd recommend another evergreen. Evergreens are great. White pines are great for that, if it's the right habitat. They're wonderful habitat providers for birds and native insects. And then, yeah, if you could get back to me on the species of juniper and viburnum, I also recommend, there are a lot of native plants there in those genera.
And I'm sorry, that was the species of the juniper tree?
The species of the juniper and the species of the viburnum, sorry about that. Because there are a lot of native species that are really very beneficial to the environment. And I know Geisinger does have a strong environmental ethos. And then one other comment, Forsythia doesn't do much for the environment. I know it's an easy plant to plant.
Forsythia, the Forsythias. So
Forsythia.
choose something else?
Yeah, there's something.
Okay.
And I can get more information on native plants for you. It's sort of my personal interest, but I think it behooves all of us to have a more environmentally friendly set of plantings if you can. So it's very doable. And I've worked with Tony Frickel on that. So it's really great to see the responsiveness of developers to planting native. So.
Sure.
Anyway.
Yeah, I'll definitely make those changes to the landscape.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Betsy also always wants to keep the township spruce up.
Sorry, we need to revise. The action deadline for this plan is March
Well, I'm
30th.
looking right here.
We have 90 days on, there's a land development plan that's also going to follow this. We have 90 days left on that. So March 30th, so we can still
It was in the packet. I didn't look
review
through
the
it.
plan at the next meeting on March 22nd.
Right. Any other comments? Let's gather any other comments, because we're going to be discussing this again in 2 weeks. That doesn't mean people can't make comments then because of the
Thank you
hearing
for
will
that.
continue.
I did not pick that up.
Any other comments? Okay, then we'll suspend the hearing until the next meeting, which is 2 weeks from tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're going to talk about a storage facility, right?
Yes.
And so,
Page 6.
Go ahead and,
Okay, so switching gears, there are 3 amendments to the saldo and to the zoning that are proposed. The first amendment amends section 175-6, the zoning definitions, to add a different definition for multi-story commercial style storage facility. The definition would read, "A structure with 2 or more floors, designed and used for the storage of materials by multiple individuals for a fee. All materials must be stored within 1 or more structures on the site. Storage of materials outside of any structure is strictly prohibited. No office, sales, rentals of goods or services or industrial activities shall occur within or outside of the storage buildings, nor shall any hazardous or otherwise dangerous material be permitted to be stored in such facilities. No more than 40% of the units can be located on the first floor, and no more than 40% of the units can have exterior points of access." The second amendment amends section 175-17B1. It's the zoning C2 planned commercial district. It allows multi-story commercial style storage facilities as a permitted use. And the third amendment is to section 153-38C, the subdivision and land development off-street parking regulations. It adds the requirement for multi-story commercial style storage facility, 1 per 50 units, plus 1 per each full-time employee, plus 1 for each loading zone. The Planning Commission recommended this at their February 8th meeting. Do you have any other questions?
they recommended that we pass this, right?
Yes, they recommended to approve it. I'm sorry. I should have finished that statement.
That's right. Great, okay. So does anyone have any comments before we, well, I guess we're going to start a public hearing about this. So the public hearing is now open. Does anyone have any comments on this proposal? It's a multiple proposal because it'll be the changing to our regulations and also the addition of a land use plan for it. Any comments? Dan?
Yeah,
Well, you should close the public hearing
Right.
before moving to board discussion.
I'll wait until you close the public hearing, then I'll.
I haven't, the new public hearing?
Yeah, this is a new public hearing.
Right, but I haven't really asked, does anyone have any comments before the board comments about the, this issue? Okay, then I move, we need a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
It's been seconded. Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passes, and then now we have the board comments on it.
I just want clarification on the response from Raymond Solinas, from the Center County Planning and Community Development Office. He had a lot of remarks related to the proposed, amendments to the zoning code. I'm specifically interested in us considering number 3 and number 4 on his page 3, it looks like. This doesn't relate to the specific project we're talking about. It has to do with amending the code and whether we ought to consider whether there should be some clarification about storage of vehicles on these self-storage lots. So I have a couple of questions. Leslie may be able to answer them. Or Doug, I know we have self-storage lots currently in the township, I think in the industrial zone. Do we know whether any of them allow vehicle storage outside of the building spaces in the parking areas?
So the definition that we use to modify into the multi-story commercial style storage facility. That's the definition that's in the planned airport district. That's the only definition that we have as
Okay,
township
planned
code.
airport district.
So there are a number of storage facilities in the center region. I'm trying to think if there's any in Patton Township specifically.
Yeah, there's one, but we haven't
North
researched that question of whether that one permits vehicles or not.
Well,
Leslie, under your interpretation of what we propose, would that permit vehicles to be stored at the commercial style storage facilities or not?
I think if they fit inside the unit, then that
Inside,
would be
but not-
allowable, but not in the parking lot. We're only proposing parking for, as we stated, one for each full-time employee and then one at each loading zone, so there would not be ample storage for someone to rent a parking space to store a larger vehicle.
again, I'm talking about in general, not the specific project. So if someone else wishes to put in a self-storage facility in the future, if they have a large enough parking area, would they be able to store vehicles outside of a unit?
And you're talking about this in the context of what's going to be item 7C, the recodification, right?
No. This is specifically about the amendments to the code to allow this particular, to include this particular type of use as an approved use, because currently it's not. I'm sorry about taking time, I'm just looking in the future, and I think the board should weigh in. Is this something we think should be allowed or not allowed for one of these self-storage facilities who has enough paved area to store vehicles, like RVs and whatever? I know there's one in Ferguson, one of these self-storage facilities in Ferguson, on the corner of Bristol and, what was that, 26? They do have storage of vehicles. In fact, on one whole side of their facility, RVs and trailers and other kinds of vehicles. And we should think about it. Is that something that we think is an appropriate use in Patton Township?
Well, that's a good
Mr.
question
Chair.
there, because they, for example, there's a line of trucks next to Wegmans this past weekend. They weren't moved all day. Is that storage, or is that, I mean, there's signs there saying you can't do that.
Mr. Chair, Alex had her hand up.
Should I just go up there to talk?
Sure, come on up. Alexandra, the township engineer, is going to tell us.
If the board can y'all speak closer to your microphones too? It's hard to hear.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, you're talking to him, okay. I just wanted to let you know, the one in Ferguson on Science Park Road does not permit overnight parking. They only permit one person to park overnight, but that's because they have an apartment. But they don't permit overnight parking, because I asked them that question.
That's not the one I'm thinking of.
You're thinking of a different one, yeah. The one I'm
thinking
looking
of is
at.
Bristol,
Okay,
intersection of Bristol and 26.
Okay,
West
yeah.
College Avenue.
okay.
I mean, staff can look into that question, see if it would be permitted. Leslie said under the definition that we have for the commercial style, it would not be permitted. So the question is that an issue that you want to take up with commercial style, or more just generally for what I call the classic style storage?
No, if it's not relevant for me to be worrying about it, then fine, I don't care, I just thought
It's always relevant for you to worry about something, it's fine. But
If you are determining that vehicles would be storage, would need storage, the definition does say that storage of materials outside of any structure is strictly prohibited.
Okay.
So if you're talking, I think you would have to designate between what you consider to be storage of vehicles. And per this definition, storage of vehicles, they would have to be stored inside the storage units.
Okay, so, right. Sorry for taking up time.
No, that was a good question.
The second thing is number 4. Whether or not it's permissible for a storage renter to actually use power tools, compressors, or other tools on site and assemble products on site in their storage unit or outside of their storage unit. Again, these are points raised by the county planner. Is this something we should prohibit?
Well,
Or, because it's not specifically prohibited in
Yes,
the current
well, we
law.
think it is prohibited.
It is?
Yeah,
it would be difficult to do that just from a need of electricity. If you're using power tools and such, these storage units don't come equipped with hookups for that type of thing.
We have to send no office sales, rental of goods or services, or industrial activities shall occur within or outside the storage buildings.
That's what it is.
So, we think that covers
Okay,
the issue.
fine.
Okay,
That's good enough for me. I just thought,
glad you asked.
because it was raised by the county planner, we should have a discussion. Thank you.
Should we send a note to the county planner?
No,
Okay, all right.
he was just asking us to consider these. And we did, we just considered them.
I just don't like people have to reinvent the wheel in a year or two and the same question comes up, so. Anyway, all right, so any other comments from the board? Anyone in the audience have a comment they'd like to add? Okay, well then we can act then on this particular thing.
And close the public hearing first, I think. Oh, we already.
We closed
never
Close
mind.
the public hearing.
I'm
We
sorry.
have 4 choices here. We can review the information included, for reference, solicit additional information from staff, solicit public input, or provide direction to the
No,
manager.
we're on the bottom of page 7, sir.
Oh, you're right. I'm on the bottom of page 9, and so I'm completely out of phase here. But action consideration. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved. It's been seconded. Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that's done. Now, I can move to page 8.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Now we're up to public safety, I think. Yes.
All right, thank you. The police department had a very, very busy month in the month of February. You'll note our officers conducted 195 traffic stops. We wrote 37 traffic citations, 1 parking ticket, and handled 51 criminal arrests. That's a lot, right? So since I've taken over as chief, and I think in my career, I don't know that we've ever had 51 arrests in 1 month, and we'll explain that here in just one moment. Bike Patrol did take advantage of one of our nice sunny days, so they got out there this month and did 8 miles, 16 business checks, and 2 vacation home checks. Under department notes, a 37-year-old male was arrested for possession and delivery of narcotics. The male was selling methamphetamine around the center region. When he was arrested, he was in possession of methamphetamine, a large amount of money, and some drug paraphernalia. A 49-year-old male was arrested for burglary, theft, and person not to possess a firearm. An officer investigated a complaint from a resident of a stolen package. The officer secured a search warrant for the suspect's residence and recovered the stolen package, some stolen firearms, and located other property that had been reported stolen previously. Through interviews, the officer tied the suspect to a previously reported burglary at a residence nearby, so he did a really nice job on that incident. Now to explain the 51 arrests, 13 arrests were made for retail theft, 25 arrests were made for minors law. Those 25 arrests, all of them were for individuals who are under the age of 21 attempting to purchase alcohol with a fake ID. So the state liquor store on North Atherton Street has obviously severely cracked down on this. We take it seriously as well and have arrested those individuals, so please do not try to purchase alcohol if you are under 21 years of age with a fake ID, so you will be arrested. 6 arrests were also made for driving under the influence of alcohol or controlled substances as well. Our officers served 3 warrants of the 12 that they attempted, and we conducted 11 vacation home checks. Our officers did not use force during any incidents in the month of February, In community relations, Officer McElrath participated in the opening ceremonies for the Special Olympics. They were down at Northland Bowl in Ferguson Township. He also assisted by distributing medals to the athletes, and we have a couple photos here in a few moments to show you. Our officers also provided a police presence and walked through the very first annual Happy Valley Comic and Collectible Convention, which was held at the Center Indoor Sports Complex last weekend. Had a very cooperative crowd and a very nice event there. Officer Tuskovich spoke with the 7th and 8th grade health classes at Park Forest Middle School about drugs and alcohol. Our officers attended tactical response team training. Detective Fedorenko attended cell phone and computer forensics training. Officer Tuskovich attended solo response to active shooter events and immediate entry tactics training. And then the other half of our officers received their yearly required in-service training and also 16 hours of in-house training. I attended the sentencing for Kevin Mullen. I attended an advisory committee meeting for the Humane Society police officer position in Center County. We're making pretty good progress with the steering committee that I'm on for that. Big Brothers Big Sisters Advisory Council meeting, the Center County Chiefs meeting, and the Community and Campus and Unity meeting. So on to the photographs. Like I said, we have a couple of Officer McElrath there with the torch lighting ceremony with Officer Laudenschlager from Ferguson Township, and then also one of him distributing medals to the athletes there. He had a really nice time there. We have a performance report next for Officer Elijah Bardzell. This is actually for that theft case where he made the burglary arrest, the search warrants, and tied this individual to numerous crimes that had occurred in Patton Township. So he did a really nice job on it. And just one line I want to read from this. It was due to the diligent investigation of Officer Bardzell that an individual whose actions were a detriment to the safety and well-being of the community was apprehended. So he did a really nice job on that investigation. I'm very, very proud of this next one, and likely you'll see me before you next year with a similar ceremony that we conducted earlier. Back in January, and I spoke about this during my my January public safety report in February, I mentioned that our officers did CPR on an individual in the Park Forest area. Officer Tuskovich and Officer Suhu, who was recognized earlier, were actually chosen to receive the 2023 EMS Community Citizenship Award presented by Center Lifelink EMS. And this award is presented annually to an individual who goes above and beyond the call of duty to assist EMS staff. And of note, they just mentioned that the officers exhibited outstanding EMS assistance on January 19th at the scene of a cardiac arrest, and mentioned that their rapid assessment, immediate life-saving care, including good quality CPR and defibrillation from our AED, were instrumental in saving the patient's life. So they will be recognized later this month at LifeLink's annual dinner at the Mountain View Country Club. So very proud of those officers. Again, the training, the mutual response that we have, the equipment that we have, really tied everything together for a very successful outcome on this incident. And that leads me to talking about the same incident again, a very, very, very nice email that we received from the wife of the patient of that event. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It is lengthy, but I did want to just talk about a couple of paragraphs she has in here. That on January 19th at approximately 1:15 p.m., my husband Bob collapsed in our home while we were taking care of our grandson. I immediately called 911, and within a few minutes, the very first responder was Patton Township Police Officer Bradley Tuskovich. As I was trying to get my husband shifted from his side to his back and try to start CPR myself with our grandson in my arms, Officer Tuskovich bounded up our flight of stairs and very calmly said, "Ma'am, it's okay, I got this." She said, "Truer words have never been spoken." He immediately began CPR. We believe that it was Officer Tuskovich's unbelievably fast response and his CPR efforts that were the first essential key to saving Bob both physically and mentally. In another 2 minutes, a host of other highly skilled professionals, and she did name them below, from Patton Township Police and Ferguson Township Police, Center Lifelink, an EMS doctor, paramedics and EMT personnel arrived with oxygen, more equipment, and they all worked together tirelessly to save him. He had suffered a sudden cardiac arrest. They never gave up on him. They kept working together so professionally, doing CPR, giving him oxygen and the Lucas machine, and so much more for what seemed a lifetime to me. However, after being defibrillated 5 times, they finally had Bob's pulse, and they didn't give up. They each know what they did, but we want to make sure what we want to make sure they know is 1 week later, he came home on January 26th, didn't need to go to rehab, was walking independently within a few days, going up and down stairs, mentally sound, remembering his family and friends' experiences in detail, and making jokes, back to the man we knew and loved. And best of all, attached is a picture of him attending our daughter's baby shower this past weekend in State College. And I had to get permission from them to share the photo, so we have that as well, of the patient with his daughter at their baby shower. So again, just very proud of the response and the team effort for this important outcome that we had there. Lastly, I have our record list of calls for service. We handled 458 calls in the month of February, down slightly from 489 in January. 52 of those were school checks, and 47 were health and safety EMS assists. So that completes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions?
Chief, you may not want to say this, it may be too nuanced and different from person to person, but what is a typical punishment for trying to purchase alcohol with a fake ID underage?
So there's many different, some, it could be just a fine, it could be a monetary punishment. That we do have some other options here in Center County. Our judges have the ability to have somebody go through what's called the Youthful Offender Program. So it's something that can get the offense taken off of their record. They do some training, basically some educational things, and pay a fee for that process. So there's a couple different options. One, again, they could elect just to plead guilty and pay a fine, or they could enter into a program like that. They could plead not guilty and have a hearing, and it'd be up to the judge to determine, the outcome of that. So.
And do we know if this is like college student age, high school age?
The best of my knowledge, they're all college aged.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Chief, I'm looking at one of the reports. I know our officers are trained with individuals that they come in contact with that threaten themselves. I see we have one report here. Are there any mental health assistance from outside our officers when you get these types of calls?
Yeah, so you're right, our officers, just about the entire department is trained in crisis intervention team training. However, the county does have a contract with providers for mental health care. So our officers will go and oftentimes do assessments. Sometimes there are things that we can do right then and there. Other times we do call for some of these other resources to come and assist us either at the scene, or we transport the individual to some of those resources. So yeah, we do have some good resources here in the county to deal with to help our officers assist with those situations.
Okay, thank you.
The Jana Marie Foundation also is active in working in that area. Yes, Dan.
Chief, I just want to express my personal admiration and gratitude for you and your department and all the officers. Every month we get a report that includes at least one, usually several, commendations for the outstanding work that our police force is doing. And it's obvious to me that the philosophy of your whole department is that you're protectors, you're guardians of the community. And that really impresses me. It means a lot, I think, to the citizens to know that we live in this, this is a very safe community, and we can count on our police force to be protecting everybody.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
In the same vein, I wonder whether you might want to include these recognitions at the safety fair so that people who are circulating around the area, because not that many people watch our meetings, as exciting as they are. But at the safety fair, there are lots of people circulating, and I think we want to publicize how great the people are in the department.
That's a good idea.
Do a wall of honor, something like that.
Yeah. That's a good idea. Thank you.
Okay. This brings me to a point where I'm going to declare a 3-minute break.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Nay.
We'll resume our meeting, and quite appropriately, there's no noise at the moment, and we're up to B here, the waiver application by Reform Cafe on the noise ordinance.
Yeah, we've had this application for a couple of years now. Reform out off of Fillmore Road has requested a waiver from March to November from noon to 10 p.m. We've approved similar waivers the past 2 years. 2021, we did send notices out to neighbors that live within a certain amount of distance. I can't remember exact distance, but we have received no complaints about their operations in the last 2 years either. So I would refer the board to look at the items for this item. The board should and provide consider action to approve or deny the waiver.
Okay.
We do have the owners of Reform here if you have questions.
Yeah, I'm familiar with this. I move to, can I make a motion?
Sure.
To approve the waiver?
Second.
Yeah, second.
Yes,
Been moved, and are we going to send the notices again, because it's been 2 years?
It's up to the board if they want us to or not.
Yeah,
Okay,
we're good.
all right.
Discussion.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, passed. Go make noise. Next item is
But thank you for coming.
discussion of no mow May.
So last year in May, the supervisor, we received a request from a Park Forest resident who had asked us to institute or suspend enforcement of our lawn limit height for the month of May, noting that it was in the middle of May when we received the request. The board at that point took no action, but did want to talk about it this year, so we could take a look at it, and if taking action, if the board wanted to take action on no mow May, we'd have enough time to collect input and make that decision. State College Borough did implement no mow May back in 2022. Included in the agenda was a copy of the resolution they passed, and then they did a follow-up survey, and that information is also provided. After the agenda was published last Friday, we did receive one comment from a Patton Township resident. That was included as item 5A.3. He provided quite a bit of information about ticks. So if the board is still interested in moving forward with the proposal, I would suggest that we open a public comment period, and we can do a couple of things. We just ask people to provide comments. We could also put out a short survey, collect that information, bring it back to the board at the April 12th meeting, and then the board could take action as they deemed as they would desire. End of my report.
Anyone on the board have a comment, because I do, when you're done? Go ahead.
I'm probably going to be the minority on the board, but I'm not in favor of it. And I think Mr. Rossman, is that his name? Mr. Russ Rossman,
Yes.
who provided information on ticks. It's certainly a huge problem in my neighborhood. We have deer coming through our property on a regular basis. I think because more than half of the land area of Patton Township is basically still rural with free-ranging wildlife, I think we should be doing everything we can to reduce the tick population by, keeping our lawns cut short and eliminating weeds, et cetera. So that's just my personal opinion. I don't think we should support a no mow May.
Supervisor.
Well, I was going to go ahead and make a motion that we support a no mow May so that we can just then have a discussion to go with it.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you.
And then we'll have a discussion about it.
Yeah. So I certainly give a nod to the concern about ticks, but I also give a nod to the concern about the greater, the planet as a whole, and the role that pollinators play. We all know, well, maybe we don't know, that pollinators are responsible for, I want to say, 3/4 of all food that we eat. And granted, there's a lot of other, there are many habitats that can support the pollinators. But I think there's two other reasons, in addition to supporting pollinators. And again, I think it's a matter of weighing the dangers of ticks and the benefit of pollinators. I'm outside a lot. I always cuff up at the ankles. When my kids were young, we were outside all the time, and yes, we had long grass even then, and if they were in the long grass, they also cuffed up. So they wore long pants, and they put their socks up over their pants to prevent the ticks from crawling up the legs. So it's just where my priorities lie. And I think the other aspect about the no mow May is, although we often overlook the impact that small motors have on gas-powered equipment on our pollution, and they're a significant contributor to climate change. And according to the EPA, off-road gas-powered equipment such as lawnmowers and leaf blowers emit just as much pollution as our cars and homes together. So use a half a gallon of gas to mow your lawn, and for me, on a half gallon of gas.
They already discussed the bag setup.
Oh, is that somebody with the mic on? So, so that's just where my values lie. Then I'd also like to say that having a no mow May, which of course is totally optional, but it does start a discussion on the importance of pollinators, and even though people may not get the gist of it, why one lawn can be mowed and the other cannot be mowed. But I think when we brought this up before, we talked about having signs. So I would ask if the township could, if we chose to pass this, if we could make a simple sign that we could then give out to homeowners who chose to take advantage of a no mow May. Should we pass it, then they could get it laminated and put it in their yard as a way of educating. So, yeah. My comments.
I'll go last.
Yeah, I did a little bit of research on this, and I am definitely one for, sustainability in the environment and understanding my age and wanting to see like a just healthier planet, healthier future for myself, my children. So that's definitely a priority for me. And I'm aware that there are drawbacks to no mow May. And I wonder about, again, just the impact and its ability to actually further this mission in a more comprehensive manner. And so for me, it just seems like the cons outweigh the pros on this, whether it be through, ticks and other sort of like pests, just being an eyesore. And I'm aware of some, studies looking at just the impact of, foregoing mowing and then suddenly mowing and shocking the grass, and so causing trauma on the grass, potentially leading to it dying, and then having to do a lot of other mitigating steps to improve then the health of that grass. I think I also read about just the pollinators, is the actual plants and stuff like that regularly sort of like in the grass that these pollinators would actually utilize. And so, instead, so I don't think you would be in the minority on this. For me, I would like to see instead probably just a campaign or something that we're promoting our residents to put in more native plants, perennials, whatever that may be, that would actually be more attractive to these pollinators. And so building our efforts in that manner as opposed to foregoing, mowing grass. And so, again, I'm trying to take all different viewpoints on this, and I think this isn't just an area where I would not really be in favor of this effort, yeah, so.
Pam?
Sutan, I missed your last sentence, but you said you would be in favor of it?
I would just not be in favor of this particular effort in furthering.
You're not in favor of it?
No.
Oh, okay. I just want to make sure I heard you.
I hear both sides, and to my colleague, Supervisor Magruder, I hear you, but I also hear Supervisor Whitman and doing much more research on the pollinators and the importance of it. So it's very hard, and I definitely know about the ticks. Lyme disease is major. So it's hard to even make a decision on this right now for me. But if I had to, I would have to go with the pollinators and looking toward the future. So I'm in favor of it. So we're
Said I'd go last. I'm strongly opposed to this because you don't really know what May is going to be like in terms of rainfall. If it's extremely dry during May, now in our neighborhood, we can't really even water the lawns because we're on wells and we don't want the wells to go dry. If we have a lot of rain, though, by the end of May, the grass is going to be extremely thick and difficult to cut at that point. My lot doesn't actually fall under this because we back up against what's a farm, and in the regulations in the agricultural zone, if your lot backs up against a farm, you don't have to mow to begin with, but we do anyway. And the tick problem is awful. And I don't really think there's a trade-off here. We know that the ticks are a problem, and they've been a problem in the area for a long time. And the other problems, when I see the pollinators out in the yard, they're going to the Russian sage, they're going to the flowers. So the idea of adding more flowers and more plants, native plants, to me is a great thing to propose, but taking away our ordinance in May seems like window dressing to me, and I'm opposed to it. Other comments?
I just wanted to remind all of us that this is an optional no-mow, and ticks are not mobile. Yes, they can get on deer, they ride piggyback, but they don't fly, they don't crawl very fast. They rely on people walking through the grass or walking in the shrubs, and then they'll fall on you. So it's one thing. And in fact, anybody who has, whatever, don't get me started on barberry. It's a tick haven. And a lot of people have that. But yeah, so I just remind you that it is voluntary, and just because it is no mow May doesn't mean you can't mow, or you have to wait. If it's a rainy May, that you have to wait till the end of May to mow. So.
Okay, well, we've heard the various opinions.
Call for the vote.
So we're going to have the question, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, right now it's 3-2 against, and we can come back to the lawn next spring.
We can. We will revisit it.
And it-
Thank you, though.
And again, I don't know if there's any efforts out there right now, but I think I would be all on board, and my wife would be on board for planting native plants that are actually going to be attractive.
Yeah.
And so if there are campaigns out there, I'd love to hear about that, and if we could support that in some way.
And there are, and this is just one
Yeah.
one other trick in the bag. Is that what, bag in the trick? Trick in the bag, whatever. Option. Yeah.
I'm glad you brought it to our attention again.
Can I make a comment on that? No May? Or is that?
Or we're not having it, but go ahead.
Okay, I was just, wanted to bring up on the, the ticks, but also in tall grass, you get mosquitoes. The county goes around, treats retention ponds to kill mosquito larvae. But if the mosquitoes get out of hand, they also come around and do an aerial fogging. When they do that aerial fogging, that kills your pollinators faster than keeping your lawn short. So if you really want to get into something, looking at pollinators protection is you should look at the county and the aerial spraying that they do. When you do spray your lawn for mosquitoes, you should do it at night, but they don't work at night. They work during the day. The pollinators are, out. I'm a professional landscape contractor and an organic gardener. So, we're as organic as possible. When we switched to being organic, our garden does much better and everything, but also, my customers want weed-free lawns. I'm familiar with many lawns in the borough that participated in the No Mow May. What ended up happening with most of those lawns, like he said, when you come and you never want to cut more than 1/3 of your desired height off of your grass. So when your grass is 8 or 10 inches tall, and then the first thing everybody tries to do for the No Mow May when they come back is they try to cut it down to a golf course height, and it makes dead grass everywhere. That kills the grass that is there, that's heavily stressed, and then weeds take over, and you get a weed problem. The other thing in the borough that I noticed, after the No Mow May ended, everybody mowed their front lawns, and their backyards were no mow the rest of the summer. So everybody's backyard that met up with the backyard of the No Mow May people had to deal with, the mice, the moles, the voles, everything that are coming that live in that deep grass. And so it's just, more food for thought there, that it's not the answer. There's much more of a cultural control that you can do as opposed to just not mow your grass for 1 month. Because talking about gas in your lawnmower, you're going to use 300% more gas than you would just doing a weekly mowing. For me, I have to gas up my lawnmower daily in the spring, and I can gas it up about every 3 days in the middle of summer once you hit summer growth. So that's the usage of gasoline between spring grass and summer grass for me. And when you're trying to cut that down and then cut up dead grass for the next month, you're going to use more gasoline than if you would just mow it. So, my comment. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so from a positive standpoint there, everybody seems to be in favor of the idea of planting more native plants and flowers in our gardens to the extent we can. I'm still not going to get a subscription to Weeder's Digest. Now we're up to
Page 10,
page 10, which
6A.
is A, Engineering, Planning, and Zoning. Proposed change to the Sewage Enforcement Officer.
Yeah, our current sewage enforcement officer, or SEO, Mary Kay Lupton, has notified us that she's shifting the focus of her professional practice, and she's going to be stepping down as our primary SEO. She desires to be appointed as an alternate SEO so she can finish some current projects and help with transition. As noted in the agenda, over the past few years, most of the Center Region municipalities have begun using Center Region Codes Administration for SEO services. I did reach out to Mr. Walt Schneider, who runs the agency and who would be the primary SEO, as noted in the agenda. Manager, staff recommends that you make the following appointments to SEO as primary: Walter Schneider, alternate SEOs: Mary Kay Lupton, Corey Warner, James Royer, Robert Royer, Brian Rowan, and Jonathan T. Long. If there's any questions, glad to answer.
Doug, I have a question. When you say other municipalities, had Patton always used this particular?
Mary Kay's been our SEO probably for, I'm going to say 6, 8 years since our prior SEO retired.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Thank you.
I've made this suggestion before, that when they send out the notices to people, that they have to have their septic area pumped every 3 years. I think the message should be a positive one, that it is the law. The current message has a whole paragraph on what's going to happen to you if you don't do it, and you're going to go to get fined and stuff like that. It's the only COG notification that has such a thing as the first notice sent out.
I would suspect if several elected officials got together and all made that comment, from the elected officials to Dr. Schneider, it may have more effect than coming from me.
Ah.
I've made that comment a number of times, so it's been totally ineffective.
Well, point that camera toward me. Listen.
So there is a proposal on the table. I'd ask the board to consider action to make those appointments as noted.
Do we have to vote on this?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I move that we make the appointments as listed in our agenda.
Okay, it's been moved
Second.
and seconded. Any other comments?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. Which brings us down to administration, Council of Governments budget process discussion.
Yeah, this is the last Council of Governments General Forum. There was a set of draft priorities that were included in that General Forum agenda and then forwarded, which was forwarded to the municipalities for review. On several, look for review, discussion, suggested edits or additions and feedback, and any consensus board council feedback priorities that should be submitted. Supervisor Trevino, who serves on our finance committee, did you want to run through these, Dan, or you want me to do it? Or?
Yeah, you see on page 11 of your agenda 3 particular issues that the General Forum asked each municipality to weigh in on. Proposals from the COG. First was a timeline, and that's the spreadsheet that has some colored dates on it. It's a little difficult to read because it's printed so small.
Yeah, that's
But
what
the main difference between this timeline and last year's timeline is that they had to bump up the schedule by a couple of weeks to accommodate some requested changes in the procedure. So otherwise, the timeline more or less is the same. Our Director of Finance, Larry Pegger, and our manager have reviewed this and have no issues related to the proposed timeline. So does any board member have any questions about the timeline?
Go with the experts. Go with the experts.
Go with the experts. Thank you. Number 2 is guidance. In the old days, this was called what was it, a cap? Or
Target.
Different people called it different things, yeah.
It was a target, a suggestion. We had a lot of different names for it, but a cap was the most popular one.
And historically, you know, when I arrived on the board, and certainly a lot of the time that you've been on the board, the Finance Committee and Exec Committee established a, quote, percentage cap to guide the budget development process of COG, meaning they said a number, decided on a number, 2%, 3%, 2.5%, as the maximum increase in municipal contributions towards the year budget that they were considering, you know, the following year budget they were considering. And COG complained, well, other people complained because the number that was decided on was an arbitrary number. It didn't have any basis in, you know, inflation or anything like that. So General Forum dropped it, dropped a cap. And so we found in the next couple of years, well, especially last year, that without the COG trying to adhere to a cap or some kind of a upper guideline for what the maximum increase in municipal contributions would be, we ended up with a budget proposal from COG that was what, 16%?
16.7.
Thank you, Larry. 16.7% above the preceding year, you know, an increase in municipal contribution. So you're a humble representative, and our finance director, along with the rest of the municipalities, objected strenuously to the proposed budget with that kind of an increase in municipal contribution. And in fact, the COG executive director, in his prologue, or whatever you call it, the introductory paragraph, admitted that this was an unsupportable request. So we went through this process of, you know, what are we going to do with this? And I talked with Larry and Doug about it, and then at our first budget organizational meeting, I suggested that we reinstitute a limit and call it a guideline, not a cap, but a guideline, and say you can't exceed this, and saying try to achieve this. Try to make the municipal contributions no more than this percentage above the prior year. And I put out 8% as a proposal. And the Finance Committee, after a week, tested it out. They agreed. And so we sent the budget back to COG. And what did they have? It was 2 weeks, I think. The next scheduled Finance Committee meeting in the budget hearing process. They did a great job. I mean, it was a lot of work on staff. We apologize that we were making them do this, but they came through. And the way it happened is we asked the finance director of COG, Joe Vigiloni, that he set up a spreadsheet with, he set up a basic budget. In other words, it would be the prior year's budget with no increases in programming, you know, no new staff, all the stuff that they had been proposing in their proposal to not eliminate, but take that all out, give us a bare bones budget, And then for each new item they were requesting, make that a line item, and the finance committee would go through one by one, discuss each one, take a vote. Should we put this in, add it to the base budget or not? And in the end, we ended up with a budget that was under an 8% increase in municipal contributions. What did it end up being, like 6.7 or 7?
Yeah, it's like 6.8.
6.8% increase. So that worked. In our view, it worked. But it was COG staff hated it, obviously, because we were forcing them to do something we had not asked them to do during the budget process. Sorry for the long intro, but now we're coming to this year. Are we going to set a guideline for COG? I think yes. I think the municipalities want that. So how are you going to decide what the guideline should be? That's what we're talking about now. We've talked about it, and our recommendation is that we should propose back to COG that their staff use the methodology similar to that employed by College Township Councilman Rich Frank, last year to provide the first estimation of the guideline numbers. And remember last year I said I just threw out a number, looking at inflation and that sort of thing, trying to figure out, well, what's a reasonable increase. Mr. Frank had worked with Joe a couple of years before developing a spreadsheet of estimates, I guess, and whatever. And they put in the budget numbers, and they came up with this, with the increase that was like 7.91. 7.91 was almost exactly the number I had put forward. So basically what we're asking the board to support is that we're proposing to use that system, that formula that they used back in 2018 for the 2019 budget. So I'm here to respond to questions. Anybody not understand what we're proposing?
I like that idea, and I have a much more simplistic view of it where it came from. I remember when I was about 10, at day camp we had archery practice, and they had these targets out in the middle of the field. But one day, for some reason, they didn't put the targets up because it had rained the night before or something. And I remember nobody knew what they were doing because there was no target. And the same thing happened with the budget process. There was no target set, and so you got all these wild numbers. So you start with something that's organized, and you're not prohibiting anybody from proposing an increase in something, but, okay, here's our target, how close can we come to it? So I agree with you.
Back.
So you said this formula, it's based on like inflation and stuff like that.
Primarily.
And so you said the 7.1, 7.9, was that for this year or last year, the output?
That was in 2022 for the 2023 budget. So it was based basically on inflation at June or July of 2022.
Okay, which was pretty high.
Yes.
And so moving forward, this would probably put out something a lot smaller.
Yeah, so this year, depending on where inflation is in the summer, it may creep up, it may creep down. But currently, it looks like it's going to be a little bit lower than what it was just last year, maybe in the 7.2, 7.4% as opposed to the 7.9.
Yeah, and again, this is beyond my realm of like expertise. I'm just familiar with, again, working in systems where like, funding, like, remains flat.
Yeah.
And so.
That's a
when I-
system we work here in Patton Township.
Yeah.
That's why we try to keep the,
Yeah, so when I'm hearing like 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever percentage increase contribution, it's just like, yeah, I just wonder about like just sustainability of that and, you know, what the reaction would be if, again, we're wanting something a lot lower than whatever this formula, you know, process puts out. And so,
I think the primary driver is cost of living increase.
yeah.
You have a fixed personnel, you have they have salaries, and then you're going to give them a cost of living increase. Last year, the cost of living was, because of inflation, was,
Well, it was, they cap at COG at 5%.
Cap, but
So
it
they
was-
gave 5% plus 1.5% merit.
yeah.
So their wages went up 6.5%. Okay?
We can't-
And their wages are a good 65, 68% of all their total costs. So that's a big driver.
yeah, and so I'm all for that, and I like the idea of, I mean, going line by line, I know it can be burdensome, and I prefer to prioritize sort of like wages as opposed to development of new programs or positions that aren't required. But yeah, I agree with having a set sort of like system in hand and asking, you know, try to stay below that or come as close to that as possible, so.
Pam, you sat through all the exec meetings last year, so do you
Yeah,
have an opinion?
The only thing I have to say is thank God for Dan for catching this and working on it tirelessly with Larry and, you know, finally with all the other municipalities. But you were the one that caught it.
I remember you came back in
and,
shock.
You know, and really started the ball rolling and brought us all to task to start reviewing this. If there was nothing in place, you know, that's why, you know, we came up, it was like a free fall. You know, there was nobody watching the watcher, you know? And it just went wild. And thanks to you, I thank you over and over again that you worked tirelessly with the finance committee and with the executive board to keep us abreast of what was going on.
Thank you, Pam. I'll remind the board, I'm only going to do this one more time this year. Because I'm not going to be on the board next year, so somebody's got to step up here.
Well, I tell you
and
what,
take over.
I thought you brought a nominating petition for us to sign.
well, let's put it this way. Whoever steps up, we will be knocking on your door. So-
Oh, fine. Yeah, I'll send out my fee schedule.
Okay.
So, bottom line is, the board okay with
Yes.
our recommendation? All right, the third item is the budget priorities. So you have the list, well, do they have the list?
It was included with item 7A.
Oh, yeah, it's this page.
Yeah.
This page here. These were the suggested 24 budget priorities. What we did, Larry and Doug and I, well, actually it was Doug. Doug proposed a different way of submitting our priorities than what they recommended. So you see there on the agenda, number 1, continuing existing programs at lowest practicable cost, etc. So let's take care of what we have first. That makes a lot of sense. Let's do that first. That should be our highest priority, take care of what we have. And then second would be maintain or replace in a timely manner personnel, equipment, etc., that are vital to number 1. taking care of what we have now. And then the third would be, then you can consider new programs and expansions, et cetera, et cetera. And that's where we're suggesting to consider these suggested priorities from the COG, with rearranging them in terms of importance. In other words, I think all of us agree that safety of those who live, work, and visit the center region should be our number one priority. You know, our fire department, our police, emergency management, etc. And then the rest in this order. So I'm asking the board to look at our proposal and see if you have any questions or wish to make changes.
Okay. Do we have any ideas right now?
No
But
change.
I think you're right. I mean, we have to, what you said is perfect. I mean, that's what the government should be doing as its most important task, I think, especially at this level.
Okay.
No change.
All right, sounds like the board is in agreement with all of this. Doug will forward this on to Eric Norenberg, the executive director. The Finance Committee originally was scheduled to meet tomorrow morning, but because our meeting is tonight and Half Moon Township Board of Supervisors meeting is tomorrow night, we postponed the Finance Committee meeting till next week to just consider all the municipal recommendations.
Right.
Thank you for being on top of this.
Sure.
Now, it says here that 7B is reserved.
Yeah, there's nothing there.
7C, the recodification project and request for board input.
Yeah, this is the last time I'm gonna ask you for this. This will pretty much finish it up. I thought I was done the last time, but when I got into the details of some of the remaining ones, I found that I needed a little input from the board. So, as noted, I have 5 issues that I have prepared. I have recommendations for on each of them, and ask the board if you agree with the staff recommendations. So the first one, can you put up 7C.1? Alex, thanks. So we have an opportunity to change what we call global nomenclature changes. So change certain words from what they are now to what we desire them to be. So we have a recommendation there, his to their, he to they, et cetera, et cetera. Then there's some other, mostly the rest is then just cleanup of different things within different chapters that we see. So staff recommends that we forward all those changes to general code and ask if the board agrees with that.
As long as we're trying to simplify the language, that's very important.
You got a couple comments there?
I do. And I'll apologize in advance, and this is especially age-related, meaning my age. I just admit I'm having a very difficult time wrapping my head around changing personal pronouns to a plural pronoun, from a singular pronoun to a plural pronoun, you know, from his or her to they, which is a plural pronoun. I mean, that's the way we all went to school, that's what we learned. I understand the whole rationale. The difficulty in our language, in English language, is we don't have a gender-neutral singular personal pronoun, other than it, which is unacceptable to be applying to a person, obviously. I don't have any problems with the global nomenclature changes. I just wanted to make a statement that it is very hard for me to wrap my head around. Whenever I read the word "they," my brain automatically thinks plural, not singular.
There are very few instances where he or she do show up in our code already, so I think
Well,
it's maybe like 6 or something like that.
As some of you know, my wife is a professor at Penn State, and her area is basically applied psychology, although that's not the name of what she does. She showed me the American Psychological Association publication manual. Look how thick it is. If you want to write a paper to submit to a psychology journal from the society, you have to read all this stuff and...
They're trying to psych you out.
There's a whole page devoted to this issue. And their recommendation is to use they and their for singular personal pronoun. And they make very good arguments of why it's important culturally to change our culture so that we're not excluding people by, black and white, male, female, because in actuality, there's a gradation. It's not either or. And, there are people who are non-binary, identify non-binary. There are people who identify as transgender, and there are a lot of things, issues. They don't recommend he/she either for the same reason, it's binary. Anyway, I'm sorry to take up your time. I just had to vent. It's very hard for me. I understand why. I just have to get used to it.
Yeah, Dan, I appreciate your honesty and sort of like humility, and I think what you displayed is a grappling with something that is sort of like out of your realm of understanding or what was normal, to you growing up. And I think this is definitely representative of, what's happening throughout our nation. And for me, I welcome that, right? As a person with different, identities, particularly like racialized identities, and having to move through a world where there were fixed things that I had to try to navigate or fall into that didn't necessarily represent me, but this was how things were, and so I had to adapt myself accordingly. And I know that I'm privileged in a lot of different ways, and there's a lot of people who are not, as privileged as myself, who then have to navigate this world where things are fixed and defined. And I think it's important that we recognize that if we are wanting to be inclusive, if we're wanting to, understand that, yes, we're all part of something larger than ourselves within the United States, per se, or Patton Township, that's important. We need that identity. And we've only gotten to this place because of differences, right? And I think when people hear differences, it's like, oh, we can't do that. We can't be different. We need to be united. We can be united within our differences, right? Because, again, that's what has made us wonderful and great and continues to allow us to lead then in many respects. And so, I welcome people having to now grapple with the way I thought about the world is not as it is, and I need to sort of like shift and change. I think that's important if we want to just be good people, good, inclusive, welcoming people. And so, again, I just state that I appreciate you and your position, being able to, say, this is not as comfortable for me, yet I'm willing to sort of like learn and grow. And so, yeah, I'm all in support, of these changes. I think when we think about language, it's literally just a human invention, and it's not fixed in stone, and it's constantly changing. And so I'm always willing and able to learn and be as sort of like inclusive as possible so that people can just thrive no matter who you are.
I had an easier time of it, I think, as in my profession, doing radio weather forecasts, I was talking to people. And you didn't know who they were, and you didn't care, except that you were trying to help them figuring something out. And so people are people. And if this helps that, that's great. Anyone else?
I guess that's why our motto is a place for all. And as we continue to grow and learn, I'm in the category and age bracket of my colleague, and every day we're learning something new. But for us as a township, and if we believe in what our motto is, a place for all, then this needs to go forward.
So the consensus is let's get used to it?
Practice makes perfect. When you use it, you get better at it.
I will take that as a consensus from the board, they agree with the staff's recommendation.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
That brings some clever segue here, but I'm not gonna, it's escaping me at the moment, but anyhow, the next issue is septic holding tanks. General Code found that we regulate septic holding tanks, which the Department of Environmental Protection terms retaining tanks. That's why I included that phrase in there. Under both Chapter 87 and Chapter 36. Chapter 87, holding tanks, is an old chapter that was added back in the mid-90s. Chapter 136 is the new, modern, updated regulations on on-lot sewage disposal facilities. So staff recommends that we can repeal Chapter 87 and update Chapter 136 with a couple of definitions, just to make it clear that all the regulations in Chapter 136 apply to septic holding tanks and septic retaining tanks also. With that, I ask if the board agrees with the staff recommendation.
I agree. I do.
Everybody agrees? Fire lane regulations.
Yeah, actually, fire lanes, I generated a little regional discussion about where is the authority for townships to regulate fire lanes. And finally, the Director of Planning at State College Borough pointed out the end of one sentence in the municipality's planning code that gives us that authority. Again, this is somewhat like the preceding item where we have Chapter 78 was added back in 1977, only dealt with fire lanes. Matter of fact, nobody on staff currently even realized Chapter 78 was really in there. Fire lanes should be dealt with under zoning and subdivision regulations because it is in the municipality's planning code. So staff recommends that we do a couple of things. This, we're going to take a slightly different approach, is revise Chapter 153. Okay, so staff recommends, notes that the practices of Chapter 78 are outdated and recommends that the issue be deferred until after code publication, and referred to Planning Commission to look at the following potential changes. Revised Chapter 153, which is subdivision land development, to include any of the relevant sections that currently exist in Chapter 78. There are some enforcement and penalty issues that are in Chapter 78 that we actually do use, and we move those to Chapter 167 where we have all the other parking regulations. And then once we've finished with those two items, then we can repeal Chapter 78. So basically the recommendation is to defer any action really at this point and refer to Planning Commission for further work. So if the board's okay with that, we'll
Good.
agree.
Agree.
We'll send that information back to General Code. The next one, again, is an issue that General Code brought up, but I think really too broad of an issue at this point for the board to really take action. General Code noted that many other municipalities have language along the lines of that sidewalks, if you can't clear the snow on a sidewalk or the ice, that you need to treat the sidewalk. The language they suggested was kept strewn with ashes, sand, or any suitable abrasive material if the sidewalk cannot be cleared of snow or ice. We've never had such a requirement. We have a requirement that you clear your sidewalk, but we've never had a requirement that you treat in a particular manner. Our enforcement generally goes, if you make a good faith effort to clear your sidewalk, then we don't ask you to do any more. We understand sometimes it's really hard to get that last bit of ice off of there. Most people do treat their sidewalks with ice or some sort of other material, but we've never had it as a requirement. Again, my recommendation is, and the board can discuss now or defer the discussion, or the answer could be, no, we don't want to consider it at all. But I recommend that we defer the discussion until after the publication of the code, and then the township take this up as a separate discussion, giving us plenty of time between now and next November to decide whether you want to incorporate something like that or not. So at this point, I could look to the board for some direction.
Yeah, I'd be fine pushing it off. I wouldn't want to mandate, though, someone put something down on top of, above and beyond making a good faith effort to clear an area. I wouldn't want to mandate that they put some trees down.
The kind of thing that people are talking about is like the glaze situation where you have ice, it's like an ice skating rink, and like snow melts and the water flows into the middle of the sidewalk. And my solution has been this ever since they discovered them, is the yak tracks, which you put on the bottom of your shoes and gives you better traction regardless of what is there. And so nobody has to do anything to your sidewalk if you are wearing something that prevents you from falling. But Betsy?
So the only comment I'd like to make is, as someone who walks a lot of the neighborhoods here in all sorts of seasons, is that how you define good faith effort is up to interpretation. And there are sometimes when I'll just say it, people just haven't gotten out there when they could, and I get it. There are times and situations that prohibit or prevent people from getting out there when they need to get out there and shovel. But if pedestrians come along and walk them and it freezes, then it's really impossible. So, and it's just seems very apparent to me that there are people who really try and keep their sidewalks clean, and there are people or there are sidewalks that it appears there's not a lot of effort in it. And so I think we need to be very, very careful, because then the only option that a pedestrian has is to walk in the street, and that can be hazardous. So I'm just putting it out there. And we don't need to specify. I think some people would take it upon themselves to make more of an effort than others. So I'm just saying. Okay.
So you would follow the manager's recommendation to defer?
Well, I know we're going to put it off, but I'm just saying, I'm just raising a flag that, and Chief, maybe you can come in and weigh in on this in terms of enforcing an ordinance. How do you determine when somebody has made best effort, or who's the code enforcer now?
Yeah, so that's who it falls on, is our code enforcement officer, and there's a lot of factors come into play here. I mean, sometimes it's drifting and stuff like that happens a day or two after a storm, and then the person may have had a cleared sidewalk and did a very suitable job, but then drifting snow will make it will glaze over and become icy. So we try.
Part of it is, if their driveway looks better than the sidewalk, they'll probably get cited.
That's probably true, yeah.
But
They're already spending their time to clear their driveway and not clear the public sidewalk.
But literally, you can see where one lot starts and one stops because of the sidewalk. Right. And I've gotten there and gone out to the street. So.
And that's kind of what he's looking for. I mean, if he looks at it, if you find that and there's absolutely no effort made, the ordinance says the entire length of the sidewalk, right? So it's not just a one shovel, or I'm sorry, the width, not one shovel length, it's the entire width needs to be cleared. generally, if it appears that it needs some work, and they have put some work into it, we'll probably try to make contact with the homeowner and say, hey, you know,
I
it's
get
a
it.
hazard, we need to make sure we get this addressed, so.
And I do not mean to be pointing any fingers, but I have seen the results.
Oh, no, there are people, we know there are people. It's the same in the spring. There are people who will not mow their yard until we cite them.
Yeah, true,
Um,
okay.
And, you know, almost the same people every year, so.
Very true.
Mhm.
So,
Okay.
so I mean, the issue tonight is, do you want to continue to discuss it at some later point, or just drop the issue, really?
I think we should discuss it at a later time and see what other information we can get. But I'm also thinking of the time when, like, we get snow, sleet, and rain in the evening, and at 1 o'clock in the morning, it suddenly drops to 20 degrees. I mean, it's like concrete out there the next
Yeah.
day trying to remove it, and it's impossible, so.
Yeah. But I'm not talking about weather condition, I'm not talking about a drift.
I know.
I'm talking
You're
about
whether
the
somebody
border
makes an
between one lawn and one yard and another, so it's, yeah, I totally get it about weather conditions changing, but.
Well, you know, even in the condition I mentioned,
Yeah.
if you're going down the street and everybody else did something, and this one did nothing,
That's what, yeah, see that a lot.
it's a difference.
I mean, I don't.
just don't know what we're gonna come back with later on. that's
Yeah, how's it gonna be any different unless?
I would just drop it. Again, for me, wouldn't be in favor of like mandating someone
Yeah, wouldn't.
put something down. 'Cause
Yeah, I
also,
agree.
I don't want them putting down rock salt and it messing up the environment and stuff like,
Yeah.
like polluting the environment.
Put that
So-
blue salt on.
So we're just
Used
saying
for pets.
to the best of their
It's not as,
ability, is that whatever the word
Well,
is?
we don't have any requirement that they put salt or anything on
Right.
it.
Yeah,
So we, you know, as I said, if they look like they're giving their best effort,
I think that's
or
the
a good
best
effort,
wording.
when you say that way, maybe not their best, but at least
Yeah.
a good effort.
Okay,
I-
and if
I'd
that,
drop it.
Then we don't cite people.
yeah,
So, you know, so the issue is, do you want to go another step beyond that, or stay where we are with the status quo?
I'd drop it.
yeah. Well, the status quo has the listing of the cinders and the salt.
No.
No, it doesn't, okay, sorry about that. Then stay with the status quo.
Our Rotary Club actually asks people that are members if they are going to be away from their homes and know that they're going to need a shovel, to let somebody in the club know so that we can attempt to clear it. So, but that's like an individual organization doing that. All right.
Okay, one more. Sorry. And this is more of a cleanup issue that should have been done several years ago. In 2008, when we adopted the cable franchise at that point, we created not only a franchise agreement, but some regulations that everybody adopted also at the same time. I think the effort at the instance at that point was future cable franchise agreements would refer back to this, what I'm calling this Chapter 60. However, when the next cable franchise agreement was adopted in 2019, it was a standalone agreement that actually had language in it says it supersedes anything that we prior approved. So in retrospect, Chapter 60 should have been repealed at that time. I've looked at it, went back and compared it to our current cable franchise. The current cable franchise agreement covers all those issues that are in Chapter 60 currently. My recommendation is that we drop Chapter 60, repeal it, and then have staff take a look at if there are any needs for new regulations that would govern more globally the use of the township right of way. And a recommendation is State College Borough has what they call a right of way ordinance that not only applies to cable operators who are using it.
Is there a motion to endorse that
That's my question.
idea?
I move,
Yeah, second.
Yeah, we can just do it by consensus.
Are there any
yeah.
other discussion on this issue?
You said we can do it by consensus.
Yeah. So all these issues, this is like a preliminary yes or no, all the issues where you said yes, they'll all be packaged up by general code into a final ordinance. Hopefully we'll have that
Just
here
trying to
within
railroad
30 days and get this done before I leave. That's one of my goals.
Thank you.
So like I said, I think there's one other item I need to spend a little time on, but I think it's gonna be, don't make any change to the code, so.
And then D is, since our base is listed as an ancient document, just to use 2022 as the new base document, but should we do that about every year?
We could. Again, this is a cleanup issue that I wanted to take care of before I left and move us from the base document that was in 2000 up to, really just puts us on, starts us over, resets. There's another layer of this project that Larry's gonna undertake. Somebody needs to take all that information that's in the fee schedule. It looks nice and clean in the printed copy, but if you look at the digital stuff behind it, it's a mess. So somebody's gonna probably have to re-input it all into some.
So we
Yeah,
agreed
so, but that, we can take this step without that step. That step can come later.
Everybody okay with that?
It's an invisible step that we just need to do for future updates to make it easier.
Okay, 8 is the consent agenda.
So I do need a motion and second, because
I
this
thought
is
we
a
were doing by
resolution.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Passes unanimously. Consent agenda.
There's 4 items on the consent agenda, a couple of Code Board of Appeals appointments from the COG General Forum, a couple sets of minutes, and voucher reports for last month.
Mr. Chair, I move acceptance of the consent agenda.
Second. Moved, seconded. Comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. And now we come to the exciting portion of our meeting, the manager's report.
Yes, thank you, sir. We had an update from Department of Environmental Protection. Ms. Cheryl Sinclair has been managing the PFA research or investigation project that's primarily in Benner Township, but close enough to the township line that it does impact a few people in Patton Township. So we've been providing those updates on a regular basis. Also got a notice from the State College Borough Water Authority that they're gonna be repainting the tank up off of 550. So if anybody has any comments regarding that, we can provide those back to the Water Authority. Under announcements, I did provide you a draft of a press release that we'll send out here very shortly about our spongy moth mitigation practices we're gonna take here in May. I also had a sample of the postcard that we'll be sending out to everybody who's in those spray blocks. I haven't counted up how many yet, but it's a lot. It's 1,285 acres, so quite a few people. But we'll get, so we're gonna starting probably next week, is kind of an ongoing communications process up until the day that we spray in May, just to make sure everybody understands what we're doing and why we're doing it, and you know, what's going to be happening. There's also a press release from CATA about a change in board members.
Doug, since the spongy moth is a new name for the same pest, should we have a little photograph of what it is, for people that don't know?
I think they usually put in parentheses.
Yeah, usually FKA, formerly known as gypsy moth.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is the transition year. Hopefully, then we're kind of using the same. We're using both names this year. Typically with gypsy moth in parentheses, or formerly known as. We do have pictures on our website. Sophie's done a good job of putting information together on the website about spongy moths and the BTK insecticide and stuff. So people have the full information as we move forward. Accompanying events, township office will be closed April 7th and May 29th. PSATS conference next week. Household hazardous waste collection is in late April. You need to pre-register if you want to participate.
Somebody asked me today if somebody collects used batteries, like large batteries.
Contact the Refuse and Recycling Authority and they'll probably tell you where to take them?
This person checked at the transfer station, and they said they didn't know.
Well, they need to talk to Amy Scherf, who's the recycling person at the rec.
Okay,
So
all
go to
right.
their website or call them. Yeah, the guys at the transfer station aren't the experts on recycling.
He didn't say he thought he talked to an expert there who had supposedly authoritatively said that they don't do anything with it.
Well, they may not, but typically they
Somebody-
they have information about where to take them in the
All right.
community.
I'll tell the neighbor.
They are the experts, so. And May 6th is municipal primary election. Into my report.
Anybody have anything in committee reports beyond what's listed here?
We did not have the Climate Action and Sustainability Committee did not have a quorum, so we did not have any business before.
The HR committee classification and compensation study has been underway, if I'm remembering correctly, and we were waiting for the consultant to come speak to us to provide some directives. They were unable to be there at the time, and so during our next meeting, they'll come with a list of, well, just more information about the results of the study and recommendations for moving forward. I know members had talked about definitely wanting to, if there's getting individuals up to the level compensation-wise that they need to be monetarily. I think I had also broached, though, considering other paths for compensation, whether it be rewards of professional development or, work from home, flexibility type stuff like that, in the event that we can't, provide more money to get individuals where they need to be. What are other incentives that could be helpful in the short and long term? So waiting for more information about those results.
And Pam, I guess you're going to be at the exec
Yeah,
meeting.
tomorrow for the Public Safety of COG Committee, we have the EMS legislative request, which will be talking about the EMS services. So that's tomorrow morning, and I'll make a report after that.
Anything else? Is there any other business? Is there a move to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second, need signatures from everybody?